Have you ever walked into a room that has all the right furniture, the trendy sofa, the marble coffee table, and the expensive rug, but it still feels a little flat, like you're looking at a two-dimensional image instead of standing in a three-dimensional space? You know that feeling when everything looks correct on paper, yet the space just lacks that inviting energy and quiet luxury you crave? We've all been guilty of this. Most people don't even realize they've fallen into these common psychology traps that make even beautiful rooms feel ordinary and lifeless. But here's the good news: you can fix it today, without renovating or buying a single new piece of furniture. In this video, I'm sharing exactly 6 brain science hacks that will harness the way your eye and your brain process space, so your home instantly feels taller, deeper, more expensive, lived in, calm, and full of quiet confidence. These are the subtle shifts professional designers use to create rooms that feel timeless and like a true home. You can start applying them right now using what you already own. Let's dive in so you can finally see why some spaces just feel right and how to make yours one of them. Hack number 1 is breaking free from the single plane trap. Here's the thing: your brain is wired to interpret spaces in 3 dimensions by tracking how your eyes move through them. When everything in your room lives on one single horizontal band that starts at the floor and ends around 2.5 feet up, so your sofa, coffee table, media console, and bed all occupy that same narrow slice of air. Your eye has no reason to travel upward or into the corners. Your brain basically collapses the whole space into a flat static image. This happens because the eye scans strictly horizontally and hits a dead end as soon as it reaches a wall. That horizontal scanning makes the ceilings feel lower and the walls feel closer, which effectively shrinks the perceived volume of the room. It signals to the brain that the space is compressed and not expansive. Before you fix this, the room suffers from what designers call the dollhouse effect. Everything looks miniature and distorted. The space feels stressful, cheap, unfinished, lifeless, awkward, and like a no man's land with no real substance or anchor. You've probably felt this in your own living room. You spent hours arranging the perfect pieces, yet when you step back, it still looks flat and two-dimensional, like a picture on a screen, rather than a place you want to sink into and relax. The energy settles at your ankles, and the whole room just feels top-heavy or missing something essential. It drains you instead of energizing you, and you find yourself wondering why it doesn't feel as good as those magazine photos, even though your furniture is just as nice. But you can fix this easily today by reclaiming the vertical plane and distributing visual weight so your eyes have a journey to go on. Think of your space like a 3-dimensional puzzle where you need to create low, medium, and high points of interest. One of the easiest cheats is the curtain height hack. Most people mount their curtain rods right on top of the window frame, but instead mount the rod 2 to 4 inches below the ceiling line. This forces the eye to travel the entire height of the wall, and it makes the room feel instantly taller and more expensive. It works by exploiting a visual ambiguity. When the rod sits directly on the window frame, you're clearly defining the upper limit and showing the brain exactly where the architecture stops. But when you raise the rod and let the fabric drape over the wall space above the window, you obscure that boundary. The brain, which loves to complete patterns, assumes the window opening extends much higher behind the fabric than it actually does. You're essentially manufacturing a phantom architectural feature and tricking the eye into perceiving a grander floor-to-ceiling aperture where one doesn't exist. You can also add vertical lines like fluted wall panels or tall, slim bookcases, because these act like visual runways for your eyes, stretching the room's perceived volume. These vertical lines create an optical illusion known as lofting. Just as wearing vertical stripes can elongate a human figure, vertical architectural elements counteract the visual gravity in a room. When the eye latches onto a vertical line, whether it's the spine of a tall bookshelf or the edge of a floating cabinet, it instinctively accelerates upward. This rapid upward movement creates a sense of lift, which pushes the perceived ceiling height up and makes the room feel airier. It breaks the monotony of the horizontal datum lines created by sofas and tables. And don't forget to float your furniture. Even moving a couch 6 inches away from a wall creates a gap that hints at hidden depth, telling the brain there's a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. Without those layers, even a huge room is going to feel like a shoebox. After you make these changes, the transformation is immediate. The room instantly feels taller and more expensive. Your eye travels in a W or M pattern, zigzagging up and down, engaging the peripheral vision, and signaling to the brain that the space is expansive and dynamic rather than compressed and static. It feels grounded, cozy, serene, intentional, and luxurious, with that lived-in quiet confidence and proof of life that makes you exhale the moment you walk in. You finally have a space that feels substantial and anchored, like it was designed with real care, and you catch yourself smiling every time you notice how much bigger and calmer it feels. The dollhouse effect disappears, and instead you have a room that invites you to stay and truly live in it. But that's only how you create spaciousness on the vertical plane. You can also create it on the horizontal plane as well, by adding depth through smart furniture placement. Your brain relies on layers to calculate distance and volume, so when furniture is pushed flush against the walls, it loses its mass and starts looking like part of the architecture merging into a single flat plane. This robs the eye of the foreground, middle ground, and background cues it needs to perceive real three-dimensional depth. The psychology here is that without clear separation, the brain reads the entire room as a two-dimensional backdrop, and the energy flattens out completely. Before this fix, your room feels like a shoebox or a compressed box with no circulation or flow. The furniture looks glued to the walls, creating a top-heavy awkwardness that makes the space stressful and cheap. It lacks that sense of breathing room, and you end up with lifeless corners that feel unfinished and uninviting. You've probably experienced this in your bedroom, where the bed pushed tight against the wall makes the whole room feel smaller and less cozy. Or in the living room, where the sofa against the wall turns the entire area into a static display instead of a welcoming gathering spot. It just feels off, and you can't quite relax because the brain keeps signaling that something is missing in the depth department. The fix is what the pros do: float your furniture. Pull the sofa or bed even 6 inches away from the wall to create that crucial shadow line and negative space. Use the landscape painting principle in your room. The background is your walls, curtains, and artwork. The middle ground is your primary furniture anchor, like the sofa or bed. And the foreground is the coffee table or bench in front. By pulling the middle ground out, you introduce separation that proves to the eye the objects are three-dimensional and occupy real volume. Add high-mounted artwork, tall floor lamps, or hanging plants to lift the visual weight off the floor and create dynamic tension that holds the room up. After this simple shift, the room breathes. It feels instantly more spacious and expensive, with layers that guide the eye and create circulation even if no one walks behind the couch. The space gains that lived-in calm and quiet confidence, where everything feels grounded and intentional. You get the sense of depth that makes the room feel luxurious and serene, like a high-end retreat you can't wait to return to at the end of the day. The shoebox effect vanishes, and instead you have a home that feels expansive and welcoming, proof that small changes create big emotional impact. Now that you've fixed the planes, let's move on to hack number 2, the enemy of uniform light. Your brain uses contrast and shadows to calculate form, distance, and volume. When a single overhead fixture floods the room with uniform brightness, it bleaches out all the subtle cues your eye relies on to understand 3 dimensions. Uniform light acts like a fog, spreading everywhere and illuminating nothing in particular, so furniture starts to look like cardboard cutouts glued to the wall. This kills the fall-off, the way light wraps around curves and fades, which is how the brain perceives mass and depth. Before you address this, the room feels flat and lifeless. The uniform brightness creates a stressful, sterile atmosphere that makes everything look cheap and two-dimensional. Shadows disappear, so there's no visual anchor, and the space collapses into a boring, even glow that drains the energy and makes you feel like you're in a showroom rather than a home. It's the kind of lighting that highlights every imperfection while hiding the beauty, and you end up with a space that feels cold, unfinished, and uninviting, no matter how nice the furniture is. You've probably noticed this in your living room at night, when the ceiling light makes the whole area feel harsh and flat, or in the bedroom, where the overhead fixture turns the cozy sanctuary into a dull box. The fix is to switch to directional light and layer it properly. Think of it like the difference between a cloudy day and a sunset. Directional light creates high contrast ratios and forces the eye to recognize fall-off. Use side lighting by positioning lamps at a 45-degree angle to surfaces, especially textured ones like fluted panels, so the light catches the peaks and leaves the valleys in deep shadow. This sculpts the wall, giving it tactile dimension. Add the 3 layers of light: mood layer for general glow, task layer for activities, and accent layer for highlighting elements. Swap the overhead for a floor lamp beside an armchair or directional sconces beside a textured headboard. Aim lights to cast soft shadows behind furniture, creating that Terminator line, the boundary, where light meets shadow on an object surface, which gives furniture real mass and separates it from the architecture. After you layer directional light, the room comes alive with depth and warmth. It instantly feels more expensive and luxurious because shadows act as visual anchors, providing the brain with the data it needs to calculate distance and volume. The space gains that serene calm and quiet confidence, with soft highlights and lowlights that make every texture pop and every object feel substantial. You get the lived-in, cozy feeling where the room feels like a destination, not just a functional box. The uniform flatness disappears, and instead you have an immersive, 3-dimensional experience that feels intentional and full of proof of life, making you want to curl up and enjoy every moment. Hack number 3 is escaping the symmetry trap by mastering the 3-5-7 rule. Your brain is hardwired to seek symmetry and balance because evolutionarily symmetry equals order and safety. When you group items in even numbers like 2 vases, 4 picture frames, or 6 candles, the eyes instinctively pair them up, creating a static, formal look that feels stiff and sterile. While this works for government buildings in a home, it makes the space feel like a furniture catalog where no one is actually allowed to sit down. The eye stops moving because there's no dynamic tension or discovery. Before this fix, your styling feels boring and awkward. The room looks too perfect and logical, lacking organic energy, so it ends up stiff, sterile, or just plain uninteresting. Even if the colors match and the objects are nice, the arrangement creates a visual dead end that makes the space feel impersonal and unlived in. You've probably arranged a bookshelf or console perfectly in pairs only to step back and realize it looks like the clearance aisle of a craft store or a showroom no one lives in. It leaves you feeling frustrated because the potential was there, but the final result just doesn't spark joy or comfort. The fix is to force the eye to wander by using odd numbers and creating a vignette triangle with hierarchy. Stop grouping in pairs and instead aim for 3, 5, or 7 pieces with deliberate scale variation: the tall, the medium, and the flat. For a small surface, use a tall vase of flowers as the vertical peak, a medium ceramic jug, and a flat stack of books, or a low brass bowl that anchors everything. Cluster them tightly so they touch or overlap, creating a micro-landscape where the eye travels from peak to rest. For larger surfaces like a long console, use 5 or 7 items with negative space, a chunky lamp on one side, a low book stack, bridging to a round vessel, and a taller sculpture balancing the other side. The goal is hierarchy, not randomness, so the 3rd or 5th element has purpose and scale to bridge the others. After applying the 3-5-7 rule, the surface feels styled and high-end with organic flow that invites the eye to discover layers. The room gains that lived-in energy and quiet confidence because the asymmetry creates movement and interest without chaos. It feels intentional and comfortable, like a space with real personality where you can actually relax and enjoy. The stiff catalog look vanishes, and instead you have dynamic visual anchors that make the whole room feel curated with love and proof of life, making every glance a little delight. Hack number 4 is avoiding the sanitization trap with the 80-20 rule of curation. Your brain stops engaging when every element is perfectly coordinated, because there's no visual conflict or friction to latch onto. When you edit out every trace of your own pulse in favor of safe beige rugs, matching side tables, and trendy art, the space becomes emotionally hollow. The brain reads it as a showroom, not a home, because there's no history, no irregularities, and no evidence of human presence. This aesthetic scrubbing happens slowly. You choose the safe option every time until the room loses its soul. Before this fix, your room feels fine but completely devoid of personality. It's aesthetically acceptable yet emotionally empty, like a page from a catalog with no story or warmth. The perfection makes it sterile and uninviting, so you don't feel truly at home even though it looks put together. You've probably experienced this after following all the rules. The room is clean and coordinated, but it feels cold and impersonal, like no one actually lives there. It leaves you with that nagging sense that something is missing the spark that makes a house a home. The fix is to introduce intentional imperfection in the 20%. Keep 80% following the rules, clean lines, right lighting, and cohesive palette for structure. But the remaining 20% should be uncorrected: the dented wooden table from a memorable dinner party, the slightly oversized chair that's your favorite reading spot, the rugged leather piece that clashes with sleek velvet, or the weird oversized folk art that isn't quite the right color. Mix eras: a modern sofa with a 19th century chest, or a contemporary lamp with a vintage desk, to create a timeline within your walls. Ask, does this mean something to me, instead of does this match? Include the odd lamp from the flea market or the messy books you love. After this, the room feels grounded and authentic, with real depth and character. The friction from clashing stories adds permanence and weight that a showroom setup can't replicate. It gains that lived-in cozy serenity and quiet luxury, where every object tells a piece of your story. The space becomes emotionally rich and inviting, full of proof of life, so you feel calm and connected the moment you walk in. The sanitization disappears, and instead you have a home that feels like you, a place with quiet confidence and genuine warmth that makes you proud and relaxed every single day. Hack number 5 focuses on creating visual anchors and flow by layering all the previous elements together. Your brain constantly looks for proof of life in your surroundings, shadows that prove depth, irregularities that prove human presence and movement, that proves the space is dynamic. When you combine vertical rhythm, horizontal depth, directional lighting, odd number styling, and intentional imperfection, you give the brain everything it needs to feel comfortable and engaged. Without these anchors, the eye glides over everything without stopping. Before tying it together, even if individual elements are fixed, the room can still feel disjointed or incomplete. The separate fixes don't fully connect, so the energy scatters, and the space lacks that cohesive pull that makes it feel intentionally designed. It might look better, but still not quite there, leaving you with a hint of that old, flat, stressful feeling in the corners or overall flow. The fix is to step back and layer everything deliberately. Use the curtain hack and vertical panels to lead the eye up, float furniture for depth, add side lighting to sculpt shadows, style surfaces with the 3-5-7 rule, and sprinkle in 20% personality pieces. Check each area for balance of heights, contrast, and personal touches. Walk through the room and adjust, so every viewpoint has a journey with anchors that pull the eye naturally from floor to ceiling and foreground to background. After layering these, the room transforms into a harmonious whole that feels complete and alive. It instantly feels more expansive and serene, with every element supporting the others, creating effortless flow and visual equilibrium. The space has that ultimate lived-in luxury and quiet confidence, where you feel the proof of life in every shadow, every texture, and every personal detail. You finally have a home that feels like a true extension of you, calm, intentional, and deeply satisfying, making daily life feel easier and more joyful. Hack number 6 is understanding the bigger picture of how these hacks work together to signal residence instead of perfection. Your brain is always seeking visual data that says, a human being lives here. The depth, the shadows, the slight imperfections, the dynamic movement. When you lean too hard into logical matching or catalog perfection, you starve the brain of that data, and the space feels unstable even if it looks pretty. By introducing controlled visual friction and breaking the flat planes, you make the room feel stable, intentional, and alive. Before embracing the full system, your efforts might improve parts, but the overall room still misses that emotional connection. The pieces don't quite add up to a feeling of home, and you keep tweaking without knowing why it doesn't click. The fix is to review your space through the lens of these 6 hacks one by one, then step back and experience it as a whole. Make small adjustments until the eye has a continuous journey, the brain receives all the depth cues, and the personality shines through. It's not about perfection, it's about creating resonance. After the full system clicks, the room feels profoundly right. It has that ultimate calm, quiet confidence and luxurious serenity where every detail proves life and intention. The space feels taller, deeper, and more expensive in the best possible way, grounded, cozy, and full of the proof of life that makes it truly yours. You stop noticing flaws and start noticing how good it feels to be there. Stop chasing perfection and start chasing residence. Your home should look like a person actually lives there, not like it's been staged by a marketing team. When you give your brain the visual data it craves through these simple psychology hacks, you create spaces that don't just look good, they feel like home. If you enjoyed these 6 brain science secrets, watch my next video where I share one of my favorite design frameworks for turning boring, uninspiring rooms into spaces you never want to leave. Check the description for more videos that will keep upgrading your home one easy shift at a time. I'll see you there.